Hello and welcome to the first event of Real Week. My name is Katie and I'm a second year English language and linguistics student. I'm your host for today. But welcome to Real Week, where you can ask your questions about the Christian faith and we can give answers. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm super excited to be here and I'm sure Luke is too. How are you doing, Luke?
I'm great. The sun's out. I'm excited for a week together and keen to play my part.
Sweet, yeah, awesome. So today's lunchtime question is, are the Bible accounts of Jesus reliable? It might have been a question that's crossed your mind. It certainly crossed mine. So we're going to have a short talk from Luke first, and then there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask your questions surrounding the topic, plus any questions that you have about the Christian faith or about Jesus. So how do you send in questions? Well, head to slido.com, which should appear on the screen. Type in the code REALLUNCH1 and you can ask any question you like. It's completely anonymous, and you can like and upvote questions if you see one that you think you really want to be answered. We want to get real with you today. Yes, there are going to be so many puns this week to do with real, but we want to answer the questions that you have when it comes to Christianity. So if we were in person, we would normally be giving away a free lunch, but due to COVID, that is obviously not possible. So instead, we are running a competition every single lunchtime this week, where we're going to be giving away one free Uber Eats voucher, a £25 Uber Eats voucher actually, each lunchtime every day starting today. So all you have to do is comment in the comment section what you are having for lunch. It's as simple as that. And if you win, we will contact you and send you the voucher. And if you can't stay with us today for the whole of it, don't worry. We will upload this talk to YouTube later so you can watch it anytime. But there are other events going on today. We've got our evening event, which is starting tonight at 7 o'clock. So if you're free, you can head to our Facebook to watch that, which is where we are right now. And if you're an international student, we've got some events specifically for you, which you can find out on our social media pages. So if you don't follow our social media, come and follow our Instagram, our Facebook, and just type Real Week Cardiff. But if you want to get access to the links for the various live streams, Zoom calls, head to our website, which is www.realweekcardiff.com. So, as you can see, we've got Luke with us today. He's going to be sharing his thoughts on the reliability of the Bible accounts of Jesus. So thanks so much for joining today, Luke. But before we get into the question, can you share a little bit about yourself, what you do, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so my name's Luke. I work with students in Bournemouth and Winchester to help them ask life's biggest questions, which is exactly what we'll be doing this week. I can tell you a bit about Cardiff. My best Cardiff memory is a night at the Millennium Stadium or the Principality. And my worst Cardiff memory is in celebration knocking over a full glass of wine in a full restaurant that then went silent. Nightmare.
Oh no, I completely relate to that. I was in Lidl the other day and I walked out with the basket and the sensors went like beeping really madly. And I honestly, everybody stopped and it was so embarrassing. So I completely relate on that note. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to hear what you've got to say. But before I hand over to Luke, remember if you have questions about what he's speaking on or about suffering, COVID, God, how does that all work? Like, head to slido.com and type in Real Lunch One. So you can ask any questions, completely anonymous. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to Luke to hear his thoughts on the reliability of the Bible accounts of Jesus.
Thanks, Katie. Together, we love stories. Whether it's our desperation to get home for another episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine or our speculation about who the masked singer might be, we love stories. We also treat them as our safe havens, don't we? We have stories as places where we go when we want to escape or spend time with friends or be entertained. We even structure our leisure and our social time around them. We embrace them truly as friends. I once knew someone who loved the characters of Friends, New Girl, and How I Met Your Mother so much as friends that she literally just watched them on loop for about 6 years straight. We also know that stories have a more serious side. We know that they're the framework through which we understand ourselves. Stories literally are our lives. We know that our stories are the tales we tell. They're the things done to us. They're the ways we've felt, the communities we've been part of, the disappointments we've had, and the ways we've been treated. So because of all this, we know that our stories haven't always shaped us the way we've longed for. Well, many people in the Christian Union have found it helpful to focus on someone else's story, Jesus of Nazareth. We live in a culture that asks us so intensely to define who we are that it can be really refreshing for us to reflect on someone else's story. We want to invite you personally to join us in doing that this week. Jesus of Nazareth's story is undoubtedly the most influential the world has ever seen. We have whole cultures built on its foundations, and we know that more of the world's population calls themselves Christian than any other faith, including secularist or atheist. But there's a big question, and that's, is it true? So I think we've found a question that frames our week together. Namely, can we trust the accounts of Jesus' life? Can we trust the Gospels? Because if they're right, we can say that it matters infinitely. But if they're wrong, we also have to wrestle with the possibility that Christians are doing nothing but wasting their life. So is it true? Well, I wanted to share some facts. Here's what we know. Number one, we know that all the major parts of Jesus' story are verified by sources that cannot be accused of favourable bias. So we have Cornelius Tacitus, the Roman senator, consul, and historian. One of the best historians that we have from the Roman period, no doubt. He wasn't above bias in favour of his things or slander against his enemies, but we know that his ability to record first-rate accurate events was astounding. We know he can record 4 decades before his birth with accuracy due to his sources and from locations as far away as the Scottish Lochs. And he records the account of the fire of Rome in AD 64. He tells the story of how Nero sought to blame the Christians to move blame from himself from people that were accusing him of starting the fire. And he says this, he says, Christ, the founder of the name of Christianity, had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius by the sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate. So there we have it, verification of the time, place, characters, and major events of Jesus' story. What else do we have? Second, we know that the major events are very unlikely to have been changed, again because of external sources. We have Pliny the Younger, someone who held lots of Roman offices and wrote History of Rome. He writes letters to the Emperor Trajan, and together they eliminate the possibility that events could have been retrospectively added or changed. They do this because they record groups of Christians as meeting and making commitments together to uphold Jesus' teaching on moral living, and they correctly and accurately reflect the teachings that we have recorded from Jesus in the Bible. Similarly, we have the historian Josephus. He again confirms reasons that mean things weren't changed. He writes that Jesus' brother James was leading the church in Jerusalem only a few years after his life. This makes it incredibly unlikely that people could have succeeded in fabricating or changing details about Jesus if James, his own brother, and huge quantities of people who had seen and lived with him were available in the city. They could have set the record straight like that. So the burden rests on people who want to advocate a change to prove how a lie could have succeeded in the context that we have. Now, of course, we know that James could have been lying. He could have made it all up, but Tacitus, as we'd already seen, could not. And James would have to succeed in telling his lie in the midst of people who knew the truth and could set the record straight. So we have sources from outside the Bible that can add to its credibility. But one other thought. We can lend credibility to the Bible's accounts without ending up in a circular argument. We know at the time of Jesus and shortly in the years that followed, there were exclusively free-floating documents. There was no Bible. We know that it wasn't written in one place at one time by one group of people. It's gathered things. We know that scholars sat down from across the regions in the years that followed to determine which accounts should be considered credible based on a rigorous criteria of witness verifiability and other hallmarks of accuracy, such as authorship and composition date. That happened in Nicaea at AD 325, and by consensus, with clearly marked boundaries that excluded many accounts thought to be inaccurate, they determined what should be included in the first Bibles. It is literally the closest thing that we have to peer review from the time. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's accounts of Jesus made the cut. Now, the upshot of that for you and I is that far from being unreliable because they're in the Bible, being in the Bible actually means that those accounts are by far the most reliable accounts that we have. And they all demonstrate classic hallmarks and date-appropriate styles for people that understand themselves to be writing truthful and accurate accounts. For example, check out these words that Luke opens his account with. He says, "As you know, many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have happened among us. They used the eyewitness reports circulating from among us from the first disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honourable Theo," that's the name of his friend, so that you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. Likewise, John, in one of his letters, writes this. He says, "That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched, this we are proclaiming. We have seen it and testified to it," he says, "and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard." So not only are these accounts reliable because of peer review and because of people who could verify them at the time, but they also claim themselves that they're telling the truth. Beyond this, they're internally consistent, they're consistent with each other, and they're consistent across thousands of archaeologically discovered fragments and complete copies from as early as only a few years after their composition. Now, that's a lot of information. It's of course true that the authors had an agenda. They wanted to convince people that Jesus was worth following. That's part of what this week is about. But we shouldn't assume that because they had an agenda, it doesn't mean they're telling the truth. Someone accused of a crime might be strongly invested in proving their innocence, but that doesn't mean they aren't telling the truth, and our courts would be in a bad place if it did. So, what can you and I do with all that information? Well, stories shape our lives. And I believe we would be missing something if together we didn't give this one a go, if only for some light entertainment. So I want to encourage you to get hold of a copy. Anyone you know in the CU will be able to get you a copy very easily, or you can reach out through their social channels. And I'd encourage CU members to be proactive in offering. Or you could find Matthew, Mark, Luke and John in any Bible, perhaps a dusty one you have in your house, or you can find it easily online. Mark's Gospel is the quickest to read, and it tells the story of people whose own story was dramatically changed when they found the most remarkable man they'd ever met. Over the next few days, me, Fergal, Natch, and a host of people from the CU are going to be sharing some of his stories and how they've impacted our stories. I hope that you'll join us. One last note on the Q&A. There's loads of things we haven't covered. Maybe you want to ask about miracles or how we can trust the resurrection. I'd love to engage with those things with you. Thanks so much for listening to me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Luke. That was, so interesting. And I learned something new that I've never learned before, which is really cool. So let's head to Slido to see what questions we have. And remember, if you've just joined and you have any questions about what Luke has talked about, or questions about Christianity or Jesus, COVID, suffering, the Heristosity of Jesus, then head to Slido and pop them in. The code is RealLunch1. But so the questions we have so far: why is only a small bit of the Bible about Jesus?
Great question. Thank you so much for interacting with me as well. Such a small bit about the Bible is being about Jesus is kind of half true. So from the very beginning, you have the Bible's creation narrative that ends with an enormous problem. Namely, how do we put right all the things that we have a sense are broken in our world? And so God does various different things. He establishes a group who is supposed to model what it's like to be with God, to have everything put straight again. But they fail. That's pretty much the story of the whole Old Testament. Just people trying to succeed in putting things right by themselves and failing. And the resounding note that you're left with at the end of the Old Testament, which is the first half of the Bible, is, man, we really need some help from somewhere else. The New Testament then opens with 4 accounts of Jesus' life, which it presents as the solution to so many of those dilemmas and a hope for the future. Jesus is mentioned enormously in the Old Testament in anticipation of him, but he appears at that moment. From there on, the rest of the book is explaining how that story spread. It confirms things like we know the Romans bringing Christianity into the Western world, and it's spreading in the other direction as well. It also tells Christians how to implement some of the things that learning about Jesus has changed for them into everyday parts of life that are still relevant and interesting for today. I won't tell you any more, but if you're looking for a place to start, I would definitely recommend the Gospels as an introduction.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's awesome. So the next question that we have is, why does God only seem to heal some people and not others?
Great question, thank you. So one of the things in the gospel accounts is Jesus, we read an enormous amount of things like healing and things like casting out of demons as well, which sounds incredibly weird and probably would quickly discredit it for us. That's fully understandable if you only think that there are things physical in this world. In other words, if you subscribe to something called aesthetic materialism, that this is all there is, the idea that there would be a demon to cast out or something spiritual, or the reality that someone could be healed by words rather than medicine would be lunacy to you. Now, of course, every Christian would affirm that medicine is fantastic. I think they're making some poor choices if they don't. But at the same time, they acknowledge that there is a spiritual reality. And I think many of us feel this, particularly in our darkest moments in life. We feel that there's something more. So Jesus breaks into this world in this story, and he sets about putting the wrong and bad things right. And that includes people that have broken bodies, people who are disabled or mentally impaired in various ways. He doesn't do it for everyone, that's true. I can't explain why he doesn't do it for everyone, but I know the accounts tell of him spending enormous periods of time going long ways out of his way to spend time with everyone who needed healing possible. I think beyond that, the Bible presents for us a picture of hope for the future, that one day everything, whatever the issue, will be set right. We've got more ways of wrestling with this later throughout the week, so I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. The next question we have says, hi, hello. Could you explain the relevance of secular accounts of Christ to the overall narrative and how it fuels the argument for Christ?
Yeah, let me read that. How could you explain the relevance of secular accounts of Christ to the overall narrative? I think a lot of us have instantly questions about whether we can trust the reliability of something that's claiming to endorse itself. In other words, a circular argument. Hopefully I've shown that the accounts can be trusted on their own grounds, and they are in some senses external sources. But I think a lot of us still need something from outside to show us that what we're reading can be true. Therefore, I think those secular accounts, kind of things from the Romans and the historians of the day, are therefore relevant to understanding the events. I hope that covers it. I don't know if I've covered everything there, but feel free to ask another question.
Brilliant. No, thank you. The next question we have is, the accounts might be historically accurate, but how is the Bible relevant to my life today?
Great question. I think it's relevant for everyone's life, not least because, as I mentioned, it's been the most influential story on the globe since kind of its inception and initial spread. I think that means it's incredibly relevant. Just to give a few examples for how it might be relevant today in Britain, we have orphanages because of people who are inspired by the morals laid out in Judeo-Christian circles, things taught directly by Jesus. Similarly, we have concepts like healthcare for everyone, in this country at least, because people felt that you shouldn't just have healthcare if you were wealthy. Similarly, things like education, the same thing applies. We have schools for everyone, and we try to level the playing field as much as we can because we believe that everyone is inherently valuable. That's a teaching from page 1 of the Bible, that everyone is valuable because they're, quote, made in the image of God. That again is a value that we would hold across an enormous amount of things. So things like human rights bills, which, as we know, have their strongest foundations probably in the West, which is the area that Christianity spread to kind of most substantially. And the Romans did that, bringing Christianity with them. That's influenced an enormous part of how we uphold and treat people. And then, of course, we've worked that into all kinds of different areas. So I think enormously relevant on the moral front. I think on the philosophical front as well, answering why am I here, what am I there for, my experience is that the person of Jesus has answered that question better than anyone else. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, that's a solid answer. Thank you. The next question we have says, you talked about a Roman account saying Jesus was executed, but that account doesn't say anything about Jesus resurrecting.
That's a great question. Thank you. I was hoping someone would ask things about this. Here's a quick rundown of why I think we can not only trust the accounts of Jesus' life and death, but I think we can also trust their accounts of why he's resurrected. The first thing is, please read the account. We're doing terrible history if you just trust me, why would you? Go and read it firsthand. That's the place to start. From there, here are a few things that I think lend credibility to the case that Jesus was in fact risen. Number one, no body was ever found. The quickest way to crush this enormous, vast expansion of converting Christians was to produce a body. And yet the Roman forces, with all their resources and every reason to crush this concept that there was a competing king, that's what the word Christ or Messiah means, the easiest way to do that would have been to produce a body. So they were invested in doing it and they had the means to do it. And yet no body was ever found. The second thing is that something caused cowards to go to world changers. Jesus' followers, particularly the closest, were cowered in a room somewhere, hiding away from the Roman authorities. They'd killed their leader, and the fear was that they were going to come and kill them as well. And yet they saw something, or had something happen to them, that convinced them to go from that to changing the world as they spread this message. The third is that the earliest followers, they died for it. A huge percentage of them were even crucified in mockery, kind of, this is how your leader died, we're going to kill you. Now that lends credibility because no one dies for a lie. We might say we've, I don't know, as a child, we've stolen some cookies out mum and dad's kind of cookie jar. When they first ask us, did you take a cookie? We lie. We say, no, we don't, kind of, even though there's crumbs around our mouth. They might say, if you don't tell me the truth, you'll be, you'll be grounded for a week. And we might hedge our bets to think they've got no evidence, so we still lie. Now, if someone puts a gun to your head and says, was it a lie? That's the point at which the truth comes out. Except huge quantities of Christians never changed. They went to their deaths defending this thing because they believed it was true. I believe that lends credibility to the story. The next is asking the question, how did they move the stone? We know that Jesus was laid in a tomb, the tombs of the day having enormous boulders, like kind of bigger than a human, rolled across their entranceway. It would have taken a group of strong men to roll away the stone. And yet somehow, despite being defended by Roman guards, the kind of the secret agents of the day, so to speak, they managed to overthrow them and roll away a stone and get rid of a body that was never found by the Roman forces. I think that's a question that we have to answer. We can eliminate things like mass hallucination simply based on the science doesn't stand up. Mass hallucinations don't really happen. And one last thought, which is very sad in many ways, is if it was a lie, why are we told that women found the tomb? If you wanted to spin a lie in the day, you would not have had women find the tomb because sadly their testimony wasn't considered reliable. You would have had men found the tomb, and you'd probably have tied it up with a load of hero stories about, I don't know, various other things. I think all that lends credibility for me. I'm sure we can mull it over more as we go throughout the week. But please do read it yourself. That's the best way. Do the first-hand research, so to speak. Thanks.
Brilliant. We've got time for one more quick question that's been upvoted 6 times. So it says, has there ever been a time in your life that you feel God has answered your prayers in the way that you wanted him/her to?
Yes, many. Oh, what? Yeah, lots of things. I can lend personal testimony to things like, I don't know, bad scenarios that I've found myself in with work, or I don't know, things I've done wrong that I prayed and they worked out for the better. I think probably whether you're a Christian or not, you possibly have those stories. I once heard a story of a guy having a debate in a car on a long journey. With a Christian and two atheists, and they were telling him why they weren't Christians until they had a car crash. And then one of them was kind of crying out in prayer, kind of "God save us." Of course, that that might just be a kind of reaction that we all have. But it seems as though there was something that wanted to believe there was something bigger. I couldn't tell you beyond any doubt that various variables were the result of those things. But if I believe that there is a God who's in charge of those variables, suddenly those two outcomes aren't at odds with each other. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, brilliant. And there's going to be other opportunities during the week, during lunchtimes, if that same person wanted to ask that question again, so has like a longer answer. So yeah, but unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. So we're going to finish up. But thank you so much, Luke, for coming today, for speaking, for answering today's questions. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from you later in the week, answering more of our questions. But we've still got tons of events going on this week, including daily lunchtime events, 12:30 on Facebook, and more opportunities to win £25 Uber Eats vouchers. It's not too late. In the last minute and a half, tell us what you've had for lunch in the comments, and you could win a £25 Uber Eats voucher. Tomorrow's lunchtime event is on Can Faith Make Sense of Our Suffering? So search us up on our social media and check us out on our website for more information. So for the rest of today, we have our international events happening. So if you're an international student, we have a special event for you. It's a Zoom call with the title Worth Dying For, which is quite ominous and quite interesting. And we've also got an evening event on tonight named How University Makes Us Long to Make the Most Out of Life, which should be fabulous. So where can you find all the links and information for these live streams / Zoom calls? Head to our website, www.realweekcardiff.com, and that will take you straight to our site. But yes, so we're going to be back tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you same time tomorrow, same place. So yeah, thank you, and goodbye. Bye.